Hi, thank you for watching Digging into China. I'm Dong Sheng. Nearly every product in American homes, from light bulbs to couches, windows, and Wi-Fi routers, conforms to standards and measurements of a global system established to ensure quality and seamless operation. Over the decades, the US and its allies created industrial standards from an invisible matrix of rules that underpin the global marketplace. Many may not know this uniformity is critical to international trade in how it guarantees that bolts, USB plugs, and shipping containers can all be used interchangeably worldwide. The standards reflect the consensus of international panels long dominated by Western technical experts. Now, China wants to take the lead in fields of the future. To the consternation of many Western countries, Beijing is employing state funding and political influence to try to define the norms for all manners of cutting-edge technologies that span telecommunications, electricity transmission, and artificial intelligence. Congress's U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission said this in its annual report in December, quote, "Dominance of technical standards underpinning information and communications technologies and other emerging fields is integral to Beijing's ambitions," unquote. China's efforts are driven by the desire to outdo the West as well as amass profits. Standards based on patented technologies often require users to pay licensing fees. Nokia Corp and Qualcomm Inc., for instance, earn billions of dollars annually from patents that underpin cell phone systems made by rivals. China would rather earn that kind of money by designing standards to match technologies developed by its own companies. Standards are gaining urgency as rules are being decided for a new generation of technologies dependent on 5G networks, including driverless vehicles, so-called smart cities, and Internet of Things, advances that will connect the digital and the physical worlds as never before. Akira Amari, Japan's former trade minister, said, "China is promoting standards that would boost exports for companies with links to Beijing as well as support its state security apparatus. If Chinese products are set up to collect the data, you have to work on the assumption that it will all end up with the Chinese government." Chinese officials and executives say Beijing is simply learning to maneuver in a system created and long dominated by the West, and that as one of the world's largest and fastest growing economies, China is taking its rightful position in the global business community. Beijing plans to soon unveil China Standards 2035, an ambitious blueprint for leadership in the field. In recent years, China has focused more on aligning research and standards in new technologies with its national interest than the West has, said researchers and standards specialists following Chinese industrial development. Chinese officials lead at least 4 global standards organizations, including the International Telecommunication Union, a United Nations body governing phone and internet connectivity, and the International Electrotechnical Commission, an industry group governing electrical and electronic technologies. From 2015 to 2017, a Chinese official headed the International Standards Organization, an industry-led group known as ISO that sells its standards for everything from footwear and management systems to essential oils and toys. China's ascent in standardization coincides with stagnation among the world's longtime leaders. At ISO and similar groups, Chinese delegates hold roughly twice as many secretarial positions compared with a decade ago. The positions provide influence over proposals, debates, and priorities. The number occupied by the old guard, including the US, Germany, and the UK, remains relatively stable. EU Internal Market Commissioner Thierry Breton said in June, quote, Europe's rivals are very active in developing international standards in key markets to protect and increase their competitive advantage. Failure to respond risks harm to our economic competitiveness and technological leadership. Germany and other advanced economies pushed China to adopt global standards in the 1990s. Chinese executives and politicians now have a saying: third-tier companies make products, second-tier companies make technology, top-tier companies set standards. According to official documents, Beijing and the regional governments provide annual stipends of up to 1 million yuan, about $155,000, for companies leading development of international standards at ISO and other bodies. China's ambitions were clear at a 2016 international meeting at the Peppermill Resort in Reno, Nevada. Huawei Technologies Corp. Demanded adoption of its preferred standard for error correction in 5G data transfers, methods for overcoming communication glitches that could garble information. A competing Qualcomm proposal already had broad support. At that meeting of the Third Generation Partnership Project, the global organization that sets 5G standards, Huawei shared a tradition of deferential consensus. Tense debates on the final decision stretched past midnight. Huawei officials indicated to the other Chinese company executives who attended that they expected their support for Huawei's proposal. A stalemate ended with an unprecedented compromise: adopt both standards, embedding elements of the 5G technologies. A year later, Huawei fielded a candidate to lead one of the organization's most important working groups, challenging a candidate from Qualcomm. Before the vote, the chairman admonished the Chinese representatives not to take phones into the voting booth, a practice of Chinese delegations at some United Nations meeting. The suspicion was that they all had to show proof they voted with the Huawei candidate, said a person familiar with the vote. A suspicion confirmed by Chinese delegates from other companies. Huawei, which holds the most 5G patents of any company, also leads in standards proposals to the third generation group, with more than 35,000 according to German data analyst firm iPlytics. 1/4 have been approved. In April, as the world first grappled with COVID-19, Chinese delegates to ISO in Geneva presented plans for a high-tech city able to function in a pandemic. The plans concerned standards for gathering such municipal data as traffic flow and health emergencies. Some delegates wondered if the proposals instead reflected the Chinese government's penchant for data collection, said a participant in the online meeting. Mr. Amari, the former Japanese trade minister, said at the time, "It's a trap. Approval would mean that China defines the standard, exports the system, and then mines data from those systems and gathers it in Beijing." In many next-generation technologies, China leads on standards proposals because it leads the field. When EU officials recently launched a project to build advanced lithium batteries, they were surprised to learn China was already establishing an ISO lithium committee, hosting its Chinese secretariat and appointing committee managers. In projects from Indonesia to Nigeria, Beijing also is using its Belt and Road Initiative to promote Chinese standards in such established industry as rail and power transmission. China offers countries subsidies to win the work and then uses its standards to lock in partner nations that would face major costs switching to international standards, industry officials say. China shows little enthusiasm for standards that touch on its sovereignty. In March 2019, the ISO committee handling systems to write the world's languages on a Western keyboard received a draft standard for typing Cantonese, a version of Chinese spoken by roughly 65 million people in Hong Kong and Southeast China. Technical experts from Hong Kong had drafted it, hoping to help secure the territory's cultural identity. Chinese delegates objected in an email, according to a European former ISO delegate who saw the message, saying the existing standard for China's official language, Mandarin, was sufficient. At a meeting in Canada 2 months later, delegates debated the draft. Proponents from Hong Kong said that Cantonese and the Mandarins are mutually unintelligible, despite using similar written characters. An unusually large Chinese delegation followed with dozens of slides aggressively attacking the draft, unnerving some attendees, said 3 people familiar with the meeting. A Chinese delegation member told the Wall Street Journal that the proposed writing system is used only in Hong Kong and not by the 60 million Cantonese speakers elsewhere in China. The proposal won support from countries including the US, Canada, and Russia, but failed on an administrative technicality. In May, proponents introduced it again, and in September, the French committee manager confirmed its passage, advancing it for adoption, said people familiar with the process. Soon after, Russia withdrew support without explanation, halting adoption of the measure at least temporarily. The war on standards is still on. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly.